Identity fraud tends to be a subject I'm very passionate about. I think there are a lot of different things happening when it comes to identity fraud. I think a lot of people think of identity fraud being more identity theft. And there's a lot of things that are still happening on that front. But when it comes to identity fraud and where it's moving, I think a lot of people get identity theft and identity fraud mixed up. So if I'm stealing your identity, I'm impersonating you. But I can commit identity fraud by taking pieces of your PII or your social security number and putting a completely different persona with it. And I haven't committed identity theft, but I am committing identity fraud. So I think we're seeing a lot of changes in how opportunistic that fraud is becoming, how easy it is to commit synthetic identity fraud. And again, it's not identity theft, it's identity fraud. And I think there's a lot of white space in as far as how those different frauds are starting to come about, and the fact that they're not really being regulated anywhere right now because it isn't conventional identity theft, but it is very much a fraud vector and it is growing rapidly. And we're seeing, especially with the pandemic, a definite acceleration in identity fraud. I think the future of identity is really going to come down to everybody recognizing that this is not going to go away, that the infrastructure is very vulnerable right now, and that you can't have just one type of control to combat it because fraud is dynamic, it's very robust, it changes all the time. There are no silver bullets out there and there's no one control that will address it. So I think the industry really needs to understand layering the controls is really the best way. There's so many different ways to commit fraud, there should be that many levels of control to combat it. So having layered controls to be able to look at each of the different types of interactions throughout the customer lifecycle and taking a more holistic approach is really where fraud is moving, or the controls for fraud should be moving as well.